Okay.
So, in an experiment to see if we can have chat about art, hobbies, and other things, and maybe spread a bit of information, Lara and I have decided we were going to do some voice chats and see how that goes. And someone decided to let me choose the first topic, which I said references, because I know that drives Wera absolutely batty.
Yes.
Now, we will admit there's a lot to talk about for references, so we're going to keep it simple to our primary topic, which is would you want to use a reference? We seem to have noticed, especially Wera, when she's having conversations with fellow artists, that there seems to be a misconception about how you use a reference, why you would use a reference, and why would any artist use a reference? Which is actually all artists should use references. References are very useful because, as Ware likes to say, our brains are not computers. I wish it was. It'd probably make our lives a lot easier.
Yes. So when I say to use a reference, this is one of those words that has multiple meanings. It could just be looking at videos of people walking, if you were doing like a walk cycle. It doesn't mean always that you're directly referencing or directly looking at something while you're drawing. It's just getting an idea of what it is.
And I think it's at this point we maybe should clarify. We are aware that there is a section of the art community that seem to believe that when you say reference, you're talking about tracing. It can be, but it is not necessarily tracing. Reference is more, as you've already said, needing to lay eyes on something to know how something else looks or works.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to talk about or debunk this notion of being able to pull something out of your own head, because that's the other problem that we seem to be hearing is people believe that you should, as an artist, be able to just ima- manifest it onto the page, which is kind of difficult in the case of if you've never seen the thing, as in the thing you're currently pulling up. Oh, satyrs, wonderful creatures, absolutely anatomically make no sense at all.
No, none. Absolutely none. That was something that I figured out while looking for references for a satyr. Um, well, okay. So I do want to say this. This doesn't have anything to do with the topic. There's nothing wrong with using tracing as a learning tool. That's a very common thing in drawing classes. And that's not, I have no moral thing about tracing. It, as long as it is something that you are allowed to do that with, there's no, that morality has nothing to do with it. It's a learning tool and it should be, and you should be allowed to use it and not feel any guilt. But you should
It's
also
also
be
a
honest if
skill.
that's what you're doing. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it's also a skill to actually look at something, whether on paper or in real life, and be able to draw it. Because I guess the other thing is, especially with digital works, a lot of people when they say tracing, they mean like literal tracing. It may not even be necessarily that. I miss that skill actually.
Yeah. So when I'm talking about tracing a reference, most of the time when I did that in my art in my drawing classes in college, we were actually doing that for hands, because that's the easiest way to learn about shapes. Because most everyone has at least one hand if you're drawing, although not everyone. I had a girl in one of my classes that had two fingers, period. So, and she was able to do some absolutely amazing work. Especially her detail work was beautiful. So, but anyway, the point is, I'm getting off topic. The the point is that like this is not a moral thing about tracing. This is just when people say reference, they're not just meaning tracing. They're not meaning that as a learning tool.
Yes.
And the satyrs are probably the easiest thing because satyrs are not real.
Yes. So, for those who are not familiar with us, we work on a webcomic called Chimera Academy, and two of the characters who we've not yet introduced, but whereas been working really hard on their character design, are Professors Sullivan and Sampson, who are satyrs. And when this first came up, the problem became of what do they look like as full-bodied people? Because yeah, they're anatomically they're kind of weird, and so it was really hard to figure out how the legs would work, much less put clothes on them.
Yeah, so I do have them on the side here. This is not the official. This was the first one that we did, and I didn't like it. It looks really odd.
The legs are a nightmare.
The legs are a nightmare. So then I decided to do what my professor always called a walkabout, which is where you just go look at things, whether it's in real life or in images, what other artists are doing, and you get some ideas. Because you may not want to do something that's actually anatomically correct. You may want to just do something that evokes the feeling, especially with something that's not real, like a satyr. So I do have. So this is my visual library. This is also what I mean by a reference. I'm not going to be looking at these when I draw. These are just some references that I have collected that evoke a feeling that I want or are very popular touchstones for a satyr. So I've got this image that Paul Rubin, a fifth, 17th, is the 1600s the 17th or the 15th century?
Oh God.
I
I'm
don't
not going to
remember.
answer that. I will probably get that wrong.
Okay, well, anyway, he was a very famous painter in the 1600s. He did a lot of paintings like this of fantastical creatures. But this is one of my favorites. I love the
Yeah,
legs.
it's easy to forget because of Dungeons and Dragons. Satyrs are actually gremlins. They are gremlins of the nth degree
Oh,
in
yes.
mythology. Um,
Unfortunately, I have a plethora of satyr images, but I cannot post them to YouTube because many of them are not safe for work.
I know exactly what you mean because I know some of the mythos behind them. They're kind of
Yes.
terrible.
We also have the fawns from Disney. This is probably most people's touchstone for these, or at least I assume. Either that, or of course, Mr. Tumnus from Narnia. I don't really want to. I didn't really want to go this way because it looks very wooden and fake. But that's what I ended up using as the original reference for the professors. I don't like it. It doesn't evoke the feeling I want. I do really like the Claver drawing here, which is the life. He drew this back in the 1920s. I don't remember the exact year though. Because this is adorable. Look at this. It's so cute.
It is very adorable. And then the older one, like it's very interesting because you could kind of tell the difference between um shoot, I forgot what the smaller one is
The
called.
fawn?
I'm almost about to call it a baby deer. It's
Fawn?
not a baby deer.
Fawn?
Fawn. Compared to the older satyr, which is on the left. It's actually kind of interesting. Also, does he have I guess they're supposed to be goat ears. They kind of look like donkey ears. It's a really interesting depiction of them.
Yes. And I adore it. It's why I asked you originally, can I please give them goat ears? And you went, no. That's why. Because
Oh,
of
I
this
was wondering
depiction.
about that.
Huh?
I said I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, it's because of this depiction. And then you've also got like the fawns from Disney's Fantasia as well. They are more like Mr. Tumnus, where it's just evoking goat legs. They're not particularly animalistic or anything like that. And then, of course, I do also have some anatomical not just drawings, but also veterinary images of goat legs. I decided not to show them because I don't think YouTube will like them. Many of them are, while they are for educational purposes, YouTube's really weird about that stuff. So I,
Yeah, and it doesn't help they've been leaning more and more into AI to vet their content.
mhm.
So it's really hard to tell what triggers YouTube to not like a video.
Yeah, like I don't. do any monetization just for that issue, but I don't want to risk it. But anyway,
Well, you don't want to risk it being pulled. I remember your first The Scuff Queen video where it, for the first while, wasn't posting. It did post it without you having to grow your channel for 3 months, but we still don't understand why it was an issue.
yeah, that one was really silly because I was using music that was in the public domain. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
But
um,
anyways, so this had been your first pass on it, and I know you also looked at a lot of other fellow artists because I remember you showing those to me. Unfortunately, they were all static pictures, or it was always not full body, or they were sitting, so it didn't give a quite a good feel on exactly how the legs work. And in a comic where a character may be in a different pose, that was also the other issue with something like them, especially for Sullivan, who is supposed to be the combat teacher. I'm so
yes.
sorry.
Unfortunately, the main thing is that the best example of what a satyr probably would look like is probably Philoctetes from Hercules. Not necessarily this body type, but
Not the body type, but the legs, because he moves around.
yeah, because
He
he
hops around, technically, if I
yeah,
recall correctly.
yes. The other thing
But
is
before
that
you,
his back is curved. That's another thing that I know that you didn't like it 100%, but that probably is more accurate and something I would like better is if their back was curved. Because, I mean, even Pan in Pan's Labyrinth back is very curved because their spine makes no sense.
yeah, the spine would make no sense. But before you settled on this one, you had actually at one point had we had talked about and considered a more anatomically possible satar, which was the real life references you had pulled up earlier.
Yes. Um, which are more like Pan from Pan's Labyrinth. I keep bringing that up because of course, there's an entire movie of him moving around, and so I watched
Yeah.
the entire thing, going, Guillermo del Toro might have the right idea here, but I don't think it fits the professors at all because Pan from Pan's Labyrinth is extremely animalistic and a much more. I don't want to say is closer to the mythos, but closer to the mythos than we were wanting. So
Well, and the other thing is the person who played Pan in Pan's Labyrinth is very, very well known for playing monsters, essentially. That
yes,
weird walk that Pan does in Pan's Labyrinth is something the actor is very, very well known for.
yes,
But you could also notice the fact that this person who had made these references had to use a staff in order to stand, and even it's she can stand like full straight, but I have a sneaking suspicion she had to balance very carefully on those stilts to do that.
yes. There are pictures of her on the stairs as well, but I those looked like somebody had helped her up there, and then they took the picture really fast.
Yeah. The other issue was this elongated their bodies in a way we weren't actually hadn't intended. I believe my original thought was Samson and Sullivan. Well, they were tall. I actually think they weren't the tallest professors in the
No,
cast.
no,
Also, problems in keeping them in panel. Like Reed is already terrible in trying to keep in panel, and
yeah,
Reed's a huge guy. And I think there was also an issue with clothing because naturally she's wearing body tight so you can see so a person who's using her for reference can see how she's moving. So if you want to use her as a reference, you can at least get a better idea of how she would move. But the problem with this is you're still going to have to figure out yourself how the legs would be drawn and then how the clothing would be put onto that.
yes. So, and this goes back to what I was talking about with Philoctetes versus what we originally wanted, is that when sometimes when you're using a reference, you're not even if you're looking at it while you're drawing, you're not doing exactly what you're seeing. Because, like, the thing about the satyrs, about our satyrs, is that their legs are not as long as hers are. They're shortened, you know, like
Yeah.
Philoctetes. So, if you have anything to say, you're more than welcome to do that because I am going. What my goal here is to do a small sketch so people can understand what I'm talking about because I don't know how to talk. So,
No, that's fair. Um, like I've seen you use references before, and yeah, you're taking bits and pieces from them and using that as a basis for when you're designing them. And even sometimes it can go a bit horribly awry as things are sort of being added on. Uh, and the like. And you're very good at making essentially a quick skeleton and then making the shapes around it.
yes. So, okay. Kara told me I'm not allowed to talk about shapes because that's not what we're talking about. But when people talk about using references, that's really, in essence, what most people, especially people who are classically trained or at least went to some amount of art school like I did, that's what they're talking about. All you're doing is getting a feel for the shapes that you're looking at, not necessarily that you're going over here and doing this, right? You're not that's
Yeah.
not what most people mean when they do that. That's still not a bad thing to do if you're learning because then you can also like see where the
Like I
shapes
think one of
are.
the things I find really fascinating about this is what you could do because the first thing you did was make a line, which was essentially the spine.
Yeah.
Knowing where the spine is, where the flow of the pose is, because that's I've heard one of the common complaints is sometimes a pose doesn't make sense because sometimes the eye can kind of see when the spine doesn't make sense and the pose as a result feels a bit awkward.
Mhm.
Um, Also doing that is also very useful if you're doing action poses from what I've heard.
Yes. So, um the thing about action poses is that they're actually really hard to find references for. So a lot of times you have to kit bash them together. A Dorka stock, which is where I got this satyr from, are absolutely wonderful for that because they actually take that into account when they do their shoots because that's what she does specifically for her artwork. So when I say kit bashing, I mean like you're like taking this piece and then you put it onto another one and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Unheard of. Um, Quick, keep talking. I'm getting lost in drawing.
um, so so continuing on with Samson and Sullivan and the fact that they are creatures uh, that don't exist in real life. Um, yeah, you can kind of see where I was trying to figure out how those hooves are going to work. I think that's where that trouble kept happening. And that's why that pose with the stilts was really nice because you kind of see where the joints were supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like you're right. It was a different field than using Phil from Hercules for it. I don't remember. Have you redone those character designs with Phil in mind? Because I know we hadn't really gotten far enough in the comic to actually introduce the professors properly.
Yes, but I can't show them because I was trying to figure out where their groins were as well.
Fair enough. Yeah, the fun stupidity that is these creatures. Oh god, I can't. I don't know if it'll be better or worse when you start drawing like fur bogs or something.
Well, at least
I
I mean,
think you
the furbolgs are like,
fur bogs are furry trolls,
yeah.
technically speaking,
So
with
like,
some cow features thanks to Critical Role.
hmm
I know logically that is not what they're supposed to look like. Like Caduceus is unusual in design in that way because they're supposed to be, I believe, fashioned after Norwegian trolls.
yes, after a specific Norwegian troll that whose name escapes me.
Yes. Like if you want to think about, oh goodness, there was an artist on DeviantArt who did a lot of that kind of thing in little comics as well.
Hmm.
Um, Probably their art was probably more in line with what a fur bog was supposed to be. But Krugerol became so famous that that particular image, I think, kind of took over. Not that I can complain. That makes the fur bogs look really, really adorable, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but it is funny to remind everybody that like Caduceus to other furbolgs looks like an eldritch horror.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think someone said
But
to other I
the
think someone had said to other furbolgs he looks sick.
yes. And the other thing to sort of remember, because like the cow feature stayed, because there's another fur bog that showed up as a guest called Nala, I believe.
Hmm.
But she's more filled out than Caduceus. Caduceus is just unusually lanky
Yeah.
um, in design, where Nala is far more filled out. She probably was more um, modeled after those really fuzzy, cute cows
Yeah, those
that you mean.
the Highland cows that are really popular that my mom is obsessed with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think her design was probably, but the fact that the cow feature stayed is really really fascinating. But I do understand it does make them look really really cute. By the way, where and I can have a complete conversation about D&D races and how they had to get modified for Chimera. Because I swear to God, some of the designs either did not exist or are just not done particularly well, or at least you can't tell them apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had constant complaints about the fact that we had both gnomes and halflings at the school, and it was like we were staring at the source material. It's like, oh, people are not going to be able to tell them apart.
No.
It's terrible.
And the truth of the matter is other than the fact that our little goblin girl who Apple, who I love, who is like one of my favorites, she doesn't look that different from everybody else from the other like smaller statured races other than the fact she's green.
I believe the gnomes in Chimera are green, but she has pointy teeth, and I think her eyes were changed to make her more goblin-like when it ended up being like, well, I don't think gnomes should have pointy teeth. That's almost going a tad too far. But on the other hand, she's very cute. Let's make her a goblin.
Yeah, because I think I gave her sharp teeth, and you went, that's a goblin. Because I was just
Yeah,
trying to fill out other students, and then we got it. And that's another thing, like when you're making characters, sometimes you just make a new one.
sometimes spawn them out of the ether.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was supposed to be an unnamed student, and then it was like, let's make her a goblin. It's like, well, why would a goblin end up in a magic school? Why on earth would you do something like that? And then you end up bringing up on the D&D lore around goblins who are actually chronologically definitely faster aging children than the rest of the races, and it's like, oh, we're going to have a story around her. Okay, so that was a fun writing exercise. I don't know how much she'll actually show up. I know she's definitely there, but it's one of those cases of you have a side character and you can't really like focus on them because that's not the point.
Okay, we're going Pan's Labyrinth on this. Pan's Labyrinth
Yeah, I
had
guess
the
so.
Pan's Labyrinth had the right idea with the giant hooves.
Yeah, unfortunately, because if it's smaller, then there's no stability there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be able to get away from the fact that they will have big feet.
They have to have. There's just no.
Now, Phil is more hunched over, and I know we've had conversations about that.
Yeah. So screw this. Okay. Cause she's not as hunched in all of.
Most of them no, but I can, Imagine that is actually probably not a comfortable position to be in because the amount of core strength it would take to stand upright and be balanced on those stilts. Because the thing about being someone hunched over is you're somewhat lowering your center of gravity,
Hmm.
which makes it easier to balance. There's a reason why professional gymnasts, tend to be very short,
Hmm.
because it lowers their center of gravity, makes it easier for them to do certain moves compared to someone who is much taller. Do you think Phil has back problems?
Now that's a good question. But my question is his spine supposed to do this to help him balance?
Well, the other thing is he's very short already,
Hmm.
so it's not as a huge deal compared to a character that is much larger in stature.
I do also kind of like the idea that he hunches over because then Professor Sullivan is closer to the kids.
Yes.
I like that a lot, actually. I wish I could get a reference that was hunched over like this. I guess I could go look at Guzma. He hunches.
Guzma, Guzma, Guzma.
From Alola, Sun and Moon.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I guess that would work. I'm trying to think of what other cartoons or anything that shows a character that's hunched over, but that's just more slouchy is also probably maybe. Now that you said that out loud, probably any anime that has a trope where there's a hooligan probably would have that slouching pose, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm literally thinking of all the Yakuza anime. And this is another thing when we talk about references. Like, we're talking about going and looking at what other people have done. But you can also see I'm not actually looking at a whole lot right now. I'm just drawing, like,
Yes, and then every once in a while, if she has a question, the reference would then get pulled up just sort of see if that is on the right track, if it's the right feel, or if there's something else that you kind of have to question. And you also may have noticed like, we had just a quick conversation of, yeah, probably every single anime trope where there's a hooligan, they're probably slouching. And we're saying this because you could probably find screenshots of that. There was a time where, and I actually think these pages are up on the website because you did a very short combat scene. It wasn't particularly long, but it did bring up this conversation about swords and sword combat,
mm-hmm.
and trying to find resources. Like there's a lot of still image resource about swords and sword usage, but also again understand that if you're doing something that requires a lot more movement and a bit more composition, you may want something that's animated to show you whether it's real life or otherwise. Because I think I think we were looking at Princess Bride at one point, that very particular famous sword fight,
Mm-hmm.
in order to see where the sword would follow through,
Yeah.
because that was a conversation we were having. There's not actually a lot of anime because they're always fancy stuff where the sword fight is actually followed through and you can see it from beginning to end. Also because that is also something very hard to do, so I think a lot of anime just kind of cheated when they can, and I don't blame them. There's not a lot of good sword fights to reference from, or that's easily referenced from.
This is actually looking really good. I was just doing this as an example of what I'm talking about, but this is actually looking good. I
You're using a mixture of you're using also some inspiration from the picture next to you.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. That poor man. No matter how hard he tries, he's going to have those pants on his hips.
Yeah, he he probably doesn't have I want him to have a butt, but I don't think he can. Cuz his spine is all wonky.
If he has any more of a butt, it's going to hit his knees, is the thing.
Do what?
By the way, it is a lot of fun when you do stuff like this and then you realize how some of it is so impractical.
Yeah. But at the same time, there is a part of me that's like, you would look at a guy who looks like this and you wouldn't think anything of him. You'd be like, yeah, whatever. And then he clocks you in the face.
Yeah, I can say that. The worst part about it is Sullivan has at least punched a few people in the face
At least,
at a bar.
at least. But yeah, this is also what I mean whenever I say that, because I've mentioned this a couple of times on when I'm talking to people from the Screen Tones chat. Like, a lot of times I'm looking at what people have done before me, which isn't a bad thing at all. Like, there's a reason why, this is one of the more famous satyr drawings, because Paul Rubin was a master, even though I don't like everything he's done personally. But
Yeah.
because there are people who got paid to think about this kind of stuff.
Any poor soul who has to do like anything that involves animation, because um, yeah, because movement is a thing. You had mentioned that the fawn in Narnia, you never see him actually walk.
Not fully, because he couldn't. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. There was no way, not in a way that wasn't going to make him tilt over backwards.
Yeah, like, because like every time he walks, it's always like from the waist up, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, it wasn't. Yeah. Now, in practice, Sullivan's going to be wearing a shirt. I just wanted to figure out the gut situation.
Yes, and this is something I've seen you do several times, which is also the reason why some of your pictures are not safe for work, is that you will draw them without clothes, but that allows you to understand where those clothes are supposed to be. And then how he would actually, or how any of those characters would actually look underneath all of that.
And that is if you are a beginning artist. I know it's sometimes really uncomfortable to look at unclothed figures if that's not something you're used to. But that's why that is a standard, because clothes hide a lot. Clothes will also hide your sins. That was something that I have figured out a long time ago. But your life is easier if you use unclothed figures. Just maybe don't do it in public, because people don't are not cool about that kind of thing, even though it's like it's a body.
It's a body. Um, it's especially important to note if you ever decide to put your characters in form-fitting clothing.
Exactly.
You
Because
might want to know where everything is.
yeah, you might want to know where everything's at, or even just like what I'm doing right now, where he's just not got a shirt on. Because like that happens sometimes, like especially with masculine characters. They're like, suns out, guns out, right? And it should be suns out, guns out for everyone, but that's not the world we live in, unfortunately.
No, no. Which is actually really hilarious because it's actually not illegal for a woman to be topless in Canada, or at least not in Ontario.
Really?
It is not. It's not something you do, but it's not illegal. And I know this because I heard a story from a social worker where one of his clients showed up to his appointment. One of our rare male social workers had his female client show up to one of his appointments shirtless.
Oh.
And for those who aren't aware, I work in a place that involves children. So
I'm sure that everyone was so excited about that.
yeah, then you had to nicely explain because yeah, it is not illegal. I think it became legal in my youth, like when I was in high school or something. But yeah, it's not illegal, so not like anyone can do about it. But you kind of do have to explain to them. It's like not everyone's comfortable with that. Unfortunately, I know a body is a body, but not everyone is comfortable with that. Frank.
Oof, we've gotten off topic.
Yeah, well, we need to talk about. There's only so much I could actually say about the weirdness that is Samson and Sullivan. Um, in their design and trying to design them.
Yeah, because
Uh,
like that goes back to that whole thing of like they don't exist. So anything that you're doing, you're having to take from multiple different sources. That's where that. If you ever go, what do they mean when they say good artists steal? Like it means that you're looking at different stuff. Basically, you're not looking at one thing. I would never, unless you're practicing references. Like if you're practicing something specific, I wouldn't look at one reference, like one picture. Does that make sense?
yes. Well, and I mean, I don't know if anyone caught this earlier when you were explaining your vision board,
Hmm.
but you were aware of where in the timeline and who had done those pictures. And you were also aware of their influence on how we view Sadars.
Hmm.
And so that's the other thing people have to understand is not only just know other references, but sometimes it is also worth knowing the history, especially if it's something that has been done before. Know the history of why something is designed in a particular way. This is also very good for writing as well, but in terms of also design and drawing, to know why a trope may exist in a particular way that it does, and not just grab it because that apparently was the common trope or reference that you end up pulling from. During, I remember you were doing a fan comic where the speech bubble was supposed to come over a phone, and
Hmm.
we were having a conversation of how do you make that recognizable to someone, and we actually ended up going back through our comics trying to look for it and found out that apparently there's not a single like standardized way that that was being done.
No, like there's a standard way of doing it in like Marvel or like the big name comics, like where they have they have their own Bible. But across like manga or indie, it's not across the board.
It's not
So,
across the board, but the other important thing by knowing that it wasn't common across the board was also recognizing when we read those comics, we understood explicitly what that it was electronic.
yeah.
And so it was trying to figure out, well, why did we understand that was electronic even though it wasn't standardized? Did they have something common? Was there something similar that they may have had with other speech bubbles? Sort of things like that sometimes can be useful when you're trying to design something else for yourself.
Yes. So, I mean, and artists are always going to tell you not to look at other people's art, especially when you're learning. Um, but the reason why they're telling you that is because beginning artists tend to look up to certain artists. And I'm saying this because I did this, and you want to do what they do. So you're only looking at them. You might even branch out to the things that inspired that artist that you were looking at, but there's problems with doing it that way. Which is that you're making their mistakes. And their mistakes may be something that where they went, okay, that's fine, I don't care. But they've made that decision. And if you're just copying the artist that you like, you're not making that decision. Am I making sense?
Yes, because you may not realize why that decision was made in the first place.
Yeah. Because that
It's
decision
the same
may have been made of, I don't care about that. What I am getting across is getting
is more
across,
important.
and I am ending it there because if I try to put too much detail, it'll take away from the piece. But you don't know that as a beginning artist. That's why they tell you to look at real life. That's why they tell you to look at lots of different artists, what everybody's doing, even people who are doing something completely different than you.
This is also, by the way, the reason why when you go to college or university for particular humanities degrees, you're often forced to read or look at a wide berth of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's kind of funny because on one sense, especially with the cost of university and college, but it's sometimes nice to have that kind of direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because then someone else forces you to look at things you probably would not have looked at yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are entire artists from that I would have never even heard of if I hadn't gone to art school. I'm not saying you have to go to art school. I don't think I in this day and age you don't.
No,
There are pros and cons, and there's a lot of cons these days.
I think, and there probably are online courses for this. There is probably even like online people who make recommendations for this. But if you're not entirely sure, maybe what you need is to pick an error of any sort of thing you want to study and try looking into that error. So where I went into for art, I was a literature major. And so that meant that I had to pick certain eras to study literature in.
Hmm.
Some of them I didn't like. I'm not a huge fan of the 1600s, but okay. But then it forced me to read things I would not have read otherwise.
Yeah.
And then you had someone to direct um, the conversation and the type of genres that they were. And there's probably ways you can look up online if you're ever interested to, you know, if you want to do a study, pick a type of art, whether it's literature, movies, film, visual arts, and maybe make it a goal to learn that particular genre or that particular era and spend time in it. And that would at least expand your knowledge just a bit more so that when you see other things or you take references from other things, you kind of know where they're coming from, or you may even know where they fall flat. This is a conversation where I have had about even certain video games where sometimes people are pulling tropes or concepts, and actually this is also for film and stories and comics, but they may not understand why those tropes or why those themes are often being cited in those particular genres.
Yeah.
It
So
also just helps make things a bit stronger.
yeah, and going and bouncing off that to something we talked about a little earlier about different eras. If you took this picture and you showed it to a Greek or a Roman, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. This is not what Pan looked like. Like, and here's the other thing. I'm going to bring back the Reuben. Maybe a Roman would know. I will say that. A Roman would probably be like, "Is that Pan? Okay, I see it." But a Greek would not. A Greek would be like, "What is that?" Because if you actually look at some of the earliest depictions of Pan or satyrs in general, they didn't have goat legs, they had goat feet. But they had depictions of human legs. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So they would probably look at this and be like, "What is that?" They might be able to infer, if they were like, and I think if they were an artisan, they might be able to infer it. But like the average person would probably be like, "Eh?" Because like later depictions of Pan do have him have the goat legs, but like earlier Greeks, they would be like, "What is that? What am I looking at here?" And you can see it on pots, especially. Um, but yeah, later depictions. I know there's some historian gonna be like, "Yeah, but later depictions always have him have legs and goat legs," but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Everything changes, like, and that goes back to like here, like this picture. This is from the 1920s. This one is directly in conversation with the Reuben from the 1600s.
Yeah, you could definitely see where the inspiration had come from that.
Yes, because that's, or with the fawns, very cute, right? They're sweet.
Yeah.
The original depictions of those, no, I can't show you those
No.
pictures.
Not unless you want to get in trouble.
Not unless you want to get in trouble.
I mean, you could censor it, but that's more work for you.
Yeah, that's more work for me. I'm not going to do that. But also, but here's the thing, you wouldn't be able to see it, though, is the thing. Because the themes, I'd have to censor everything.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's funny.
But I mean, but I will say that my satyrs have more in common with Clevers than probably Rubens, if I had to be honest. But that's what I mean. Like everything's in conversation with everything else. And that's why it's so important to use references to see what other people have done, because you may not want to do this. Like you may not want, this may not be what that looks like to you. Why is he so handsome?
Because he was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's true.
I will remind you, this man got married.
Yeah, to a hottie. What? That's a spoiler.
Anyways, anyways, the point is you will at some point need to use references because even though people often say you should be able to create it wholesale, that requires knowledge. No one has that kind of knowledge.
Because your brain
Whether
is
it's
not
writing
a
or,
computer.
yeah, computer. Uh,
Like, okay, I know that there are probably some people watching this go, but but Drawfee doesn't use references. Okay, that's not true because sometimes they'll say they're using a reference, but they're also doing something incredibly specific. And if you've actually watched them draw something with references, then their artwork is completely different. They go from like something that's actually kind of cartoony or kind of, extremely broken. I don't know what you'd call it exactly. What's a term everybody would know? I don't want to say cartoony.
stylized?
Stylized. Thank you. That's very stylized versus their work that they don't do. But also, Drawfee is doing something very specific. They are drawing from off the dome something silly. Like there's an entire series of videos for Drawfee where Julia goes, "Can I please look up what this person looks like because I don't know what they look like."
But that would spoil the fun.
But that would spoil the fun. But that is not, unless that's something you really want to do, more power to you. But the rest of us don't do that. I have to look at references for everything. I have an entire visual library that is pictures of me doing stuff that I can't show you
Because she's not wearing anything.
because I'm not wearing anything. Or it's pictures of people that were classmates because we all made these visual libraries for each other because we all had different body types, we all had different agility levels, that kind of thing, right? And we all
Yeah.
promised we'd never show anybody.
Yep, absolutely fair.
Yeah. So, but not everybody has that. Not everybody had that, group of people. And if you're watching this and you did go to school with me, I still use those. I still know. I still have those. So I'm not sorry.
No, I imagine not.
This is very. I didn't mean for this, but this is very Spring Hill Jack looking. I kind of dig it, but I wasn't meaning for him to be very. The more I draw him, the handsomer he gets. That's another thing, like why I try to use references because I automatically make everyone like supermodel handsome. And if I use a reference, I don't tend to do that as much. So
Yeah. Um, I think that's a habit for stylization is to make everyone like super handsome. I think he's supposed to look more craggly.
he is. I'm trying to fix it. Oh, where's his face? I have his face somewhere. The person I look at for his face.
Yes, Wera has an entire library of faces, um, in order to try to remain all the characters to stay on model.
It doesn't always work, but I do suggest that you do that. Like I know that the most common way of doing that is to use celebrities because there's more of them. That's not a bad idea. Just know that you will get in the habit. Is that if you do that a lot, you will get in the habit of making everyone just gorgeous, or you end up
I
with the
wonder if faces of athletes would be better because you kind of have more photos of athletes' faces, not as many as other celebrities, but just about enough, and they tend to have more variation, which is often born out of the very specific sports that they tend to do. Actually, that being said, professional athletes for the more obscure um, sports are actually very good reference for body models. Like when we were talking about, so Jiva Reed is essentially built like a more traditional like athlete bodybuilder. By athlete bodybuilder, if you've ever seen those people at the Olympics, they're not built like the handsome bodybuilders. They look like teddy bears.
yes. So Reed is actually a specific person whose name escapes me, and I would have to go searching through my work. He is a Southeast Asian. I think he's from Thailand. He's a shot putter. That's his body.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah,
And
by the
also a
way, a
guy
lot
I
of
used
people
to go to
don't,
school with too. But
yeah, a lot of people don't realize this. People who lift weights, like as a professional sport and do shot put, they tend to be more filled out, and that is actually because apparently fat protects your organs.
yes, which and it's a good thing. There are also some absolutely beautiful shot put women. If you ever need like a strong woman, you know, like, and some of you like little lesbians are knowing exactly what I'm talking about. Shot putters, that's what you want. You want a shot putter. They're all gorgeous. They're all like, you know, jacked, gorgeous, and they all have cool tattoos for some reason.
Well, you might as well.
Yeah, but yeah, Kara is right. Uh, Athletes are another really good one. If you want like celebrities that aren't gorgeous, but there's still a lot of pictures of, you can look into non-American, non-Korean, and non-Japanese, and non-Chinese celebrities for their countries, people who haven't really gone on to the countries that are more famous for their movies. Do you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah,
Like,
I do understand what you
yeah,
mean by that.
because usually
Yeah.
those people are not usually Hollywood gorgeous, but they're still like handsome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that actually
there's
makes a
more
lot of sense.
variation. Do what?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean by that because the film or TV industry has not gotten their claws into them yet.
Yeah, like Bollywood is actually a really good reference if you ever need anybody from, because like that's actually a lot of different ethnicities for one, Bollywood actors, but two, some of their highest grossing actors just look like somebody's
Normal
dad.
people.
And it's
Yeah.
great. It's wonderful. They have wonderful faces, they do wonderful expressions because Bollywood movies are very expressive. But yeah, that's also another one that I have a lot of references from. What else? Like Korean movies, like I would, if you're drawing a lot of Korean characters, I would maybe stay away from those unless you want everyone to be beautiful because everyone just is beautiful.
That's because their industry is actually pretty terrible
Yeah,
as far as beauty standards go.
yeah.
I believe
Chinese
Korea
actors
has a
are,
higher
huh? What?
I believe Korea has a higher rate of plastic surgery
Yeah.
over there.
Chinese actors tend to, their male actors tend to be more varied than Hollywood actors, but I have, they all tend to be extremely handsome.
Yeah, that is more, I think, the result of the kind of shows that often
Or at least the shows I watch,
fantasy,
but I mean, I also watched a crime drama the other day, and I'm like, all of these men are beautiful.
because I think they're all the same people, like doing a lot of film.
That's
And the thing
true.
that,
That's true. There
and
was
the thing is,
one of those
is
guys was from The Untamed, and I went, oh, I know you.
yeah, yeah, and historic drama, historic fantasy in China is incredibly big, which also has partly to do with it.
Yeah, your family, your mom and dad, they don't like the fantasy ones, right? But they like the historic ones.
They don't like historic fantasy. They like historic dramas, but they don't like historic fantasy. So, yeah, don't ask them about the cultivation trope. They know shit about that.
Which is so funny to me. Hey, mom and dad, I'm interested in our culture's movies. This is what I'm into. Blank look.
You know what's even more hilarious?
What?
Is as far as historic dramas go, what my mom's into is apparently the isekai trope, which I was not expecting out of my life until I asked her what she was watching on her phone.
That's so funny. I probably know exactly which one she was watching, too. Oh,
It's like of all the genres, I mean, I'm no better, but huh, that's not what I was expecting out of my life.
they are very popular, though. There's a lot of them. Gosh, there's so many.
Well, and I think the advantage of the isekai historic dramas is they can be at they can be naturally really silly. Whereas one of the complaints my parents had about historic fantasy dramas is it is unusually silly, especially on the male side. Like when something serious can happen, and the it seems to almost be an excuse for the male characters to suddenly do slapstick comedy because they don't know what to do.
Yeah. I enjoy that though. But I can understand why your parents are like, ugh. Cuz
They're like, "There's something serious happening. Can you two get your shit together?"
yeah, like cuz I think you told me once that your parents had watched something I had watched, and I realized, oh man, they must have hated that part because like in the background they're like throwing stuff and they're like freaking out and everything, and I'm like, while the women characters are like having a moment. And I'm like, your parents must have hated that. Whereas I loved
Yeah,
it. I
no,
thought that was hysterical. Because that's how men are when things are happening.
not a lie, actually.
Yeah. Oh no, women are crying. What do I do? I'm going to start chopping wood.
Oh man.
I mean, that's more of a US American Midwest trope, but apparently it is true across cultures.